Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the opening session of the Virtual Island Summit. We appreciate this is a Sunday, and it's great to see so many people joining. I'm just going to give us a minute or two as people join, especially as this is the first section. I know some people might have some technological difficulties, but we really appreciate the diversity and the level of interest that we've been having from islands around the world. This session is also being live streamed on the Island Innovation Facebook page. So hello to anyone joining in there. But I would encourage you, if you can, to use the Zoom app to join, as that allows greater levels of interaction, chat, Q&A. I can already see a hello from Valerie Vezina in the chat. And so while we're getting started and waiting for a few more people to join, would encourage everyone here to go ahead and introduce themselves in the chat. And I'm also going to launch a poll so we can find out who everyone is and where they're joining from. So please tell us a little bit about yourself in the chat box. And I can already see people answering the poll. So we'll give that about 10 or 15 more seconds and see. We've got Chris Huxley coming from St. Lucia, Sarah McKinnon in the Outer Hebrides. There's a couple of people from St. Lucia in the Bahamas. That's fantastic. And one of the great things about this summit, while we've got nearly 3,000 people signed up so far, and we're expecting a lot more signups during the week. Obviously, each event will have a different number of people, but the great thing has been seeing the diversity of different people joining us from different places, from the Arctic islands in Svalbard and Russia, across the Caribbean, the Scottish Islands, down to the Indian Ocean and the South Pacific and Patagonia. So there's this huge diversity of people who've been joining us, and I think this week is going to be a really exciting week to allow people from such diverse places that might not have had the opportunity to interact with each other as much before, to share their experiences. So in a few minutes, we're going to have a welcome address by Dr. Didacus Jules from the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, who are who are our main partner alongside Island Innovation for holding this event. Just before he joins, I'm going to end the poll and share that. So feel free to have a look at that. Actually, that's really exciting that our largest number of participants are from the Caribbean and a lot from North America. We don't have anyone from the Pacific, which is a shame, but I think it's about 3 a.m. there right now. So that's not surprising. And don't worry, those people are able to catch up on all of these sessions on record. We have 27 sessions spread throughout the week, and I know that's a lot, and you all have busy lives. So we're not expecting everyone to join every session live. Obviously, as you can see, there's a great chat and interactive element with this, with the polls, and we would like to use that. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to ask you one more poll just while we're getting started to find out the range of sessions, range of sectors that people are joining from. As well as connecting islands from around the world, one of the main goals of this summit was to find out how we can bridge the different sectors. I have a renewable energy background, but since more recently I've started working across the different areas of sustainability. And energy sector particularly is one that requires a lot of integration from all the different sectors. Particularly on small islands, you have to have the government, the private sector, the utility company, and even NGOs all working together to move forward on that renewable energy transition. And actually, I can see a really equal spread. Interestingly, that the private sector, I'll end the poll in 5 seconds so you can see this, but I'm just having a look. The private sector is our best represented group, which is fantastic. But we also have people from academia, the public sector, and NGOs joining a lot. And I can see people going, really typing in the chat and introducing themselves. I would encourage you actually to make sure that when you're typing in the chat, you select the all panelists and attendees, the blue box at the top. You can message people individually. You can message all panelists. And you can also message all panelists and attendees. So if you selected all panelists, it means that most of the people here can't see you. So make sure you have the right option there. And I also wanted to point out another feature, which is the Q&A feature. So as well as having the submissions in the chat, I'd encourage you, if you do have questions, to submit them within the Q&A. And for the Q&A, we'll have a look through those and answer. So finally, the second half of this session, or the second part, will be a talk from Mike Eman, who is the former Prime Minister and the current leader of the opposition of Aruba. And he'll be joining us in around 20 or 30 minutes or so. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome His Excellency, the Director of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, Dr. Didacus Jules, who's a Grenadian national living in St. Lucia, but is joining us from Kingston, Jamaica. So over to you, Dr. Jules, if you can unmute and go ahead.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Distinguished friends and colleagues, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States is very happy to join with Island Innovation to extend a warm island welcome to all of you who've registered to participate in this first ever virtual island summit. In many tropical island cultures worldwide, the conch shell is used as a horn to signal and summon people to gather and to take action. And today, in that spirit, the convening of this virtual island summit is that call to action. We, the island people, are convening to discuss the peculiarities of our islandness, to analyze the challenges, to identify the opportunities that present themselves. While the most pernicious and devastating impacts of climate change have been visited on us, we are coming together not as helpless victims paralyzed by circumstance, but as protagonists of the possible. As islands and as small spaces, we are coming together to share ideas and solutions that are working to address our challenges. Many of these present scalable potential that impact or could impact the global ecosystem. Given the magnitude of the environmental crisis, the challenge for small island states is no longer defining a sustainable development pathway, but we believe in designing and building a regenerative paradigm. Our planet is at a crossroad of unsustainability, and the future therefore must be regenerative. In our quest for that regenerative model, we will be taking a systemic and ecological approach in which the interconnectedness of things must be emphasized. This is reflected in the topics of discussion of the Virtual Island Summit, from the cultural to the climatic, from innovation to infrastructure, and the intersections of the blue, green, and orange economies. Welcome to the global dialogue where small places discuss how to achieve big things. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Dr. Jules, for that introduction. I think we're really excited to have the OECS as a major partner, and I can see in the chat as well all of your staff members back in St. Lucia who are chiming in and giving some introductions. A quick question for you about the OECS's role and the wider work that you do. Obviously, part of the reason that the OECS exists is to build collaboration between its member states, and maybe you could just run through the names of the member states. I don't have them right in front of me. But also there's a role for OECS to have a wider discussion and create a wider discussion for your member states to be able to interact with other islands around the world. And I remember back in December, we sat in on a meeting together with the Secretary General of the Pacific Island Development Forum, and you had a really interesting discussion about potential collaboration around between the PIDF and the OECS. So I'd be curious if you could just tell me a little bit, what do you think the opportunities are that the world can learn from OECS and its member states, but also what you would like to learn from other places?
Well, first of all, the OECS is a 12-member grouping of islands. If you look on the map of the Caribbean, the archipelago of islands from the British Virgin Islands in the north, as far south as Grenada down to Grenada, Carriacou and Petit Martinique, pretty much all of the islands there, with the exception of the Dutch islands and Barbados, are members of the OECS. We have there are 6 independent member states that constitute the economic union. So we share a common currency, fiscal policies determined collectively, and there are 6 non-independent member states. Of the non-independent member states, 3 are British overseas territories: Anguilla, British Virgin Islands, Montserrat, and 3 are French territories, so Martinique, Guadeloupe, and Saint Martin on the French side. So we have been described in many quarters as a more successful EU because essentially we share this. There's the revised Treaty of Basel that outlines the aims and objectives of the integration movement, and it is essentially to build a single economic and social space in the Caribbean, in that part of the Caribbean, and to deepen and establish mechanisms of functional cooperation. So there are many areas in which we cooperate. We have different ministerial forums that include health, education, youth, social development, environment, and they meet regularly to coordinate activities. The important distinction for us in how we work is that we have very strong partnerships. We don't sign MOUs for the sake of signing MOUs. Our partners are, integrally involved in the work that we do. And we have working groups, virtual working groups. So we make a lot of use of the technologies such as this one that we are using now, Zoom, in order to have regular meetings and to have people work at a horizontal level. So across the public services, as well as the private sector and civil society, our partners are integrally involved. We shape the agenda together.
Thank you. And one quick question, and then I'll leave you to it, because I know you've just arrived after a long flight. So we really appreciate you joining. Someone just asked, you mentioned the orange economy. I'm curious what that is, if it's a term that they might not have heard, and what the OECS is doing.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing that, suddenly nowadays in the lexicon of development, we have all these colors emerging. So it's like a rainbow of economies. But the orange economy essentially refers to cultural industries. And so for us, everything we do, we as a general principle, whatever work we do with member states in terms of human development, we try to ensure that we alter the DNA of the sector in which we are working, because I've seen over the years many projects executed, not just in the Caribbean, but all across the world. And after the project funding is over, even if the project may have been spectacularly successful, 5 years later, it's as if nothing ever happened. We are back to business as before. So as a general principle, we'd like to ensure that the interventions we make actually alter that DNA of the sector so that we are doing things differently from how they were done before. And so the cultural economy is critical for us, because that's where we get to express our culture. We get to learn the lessons of utilize indigenous knowledge. In the area of environment, that is really critical. You talk to old people and they tell you, for example, in a lot of areas where developments have happened and then, settlements have been flooded out, the old people in their wisdom would tell you they would never have built in those areas because they know historically from way back, these have been water-course areas. So one should not discount the value of indigenous knowledge and traditional knowledge in shaping solutions for today.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure to work with all of your staff at the OECS in St. Lucia. I won't name everyone, but particularly Lisa Taylor Stone and Judith Ephraim, who've been essential in bringing this collaboration together. So a big thank you to both of
Yeah,
those.
I would also
Everyone
like
else.
to use the opportunity to express my gratitude. And we have a fantastic team at the OECS. Lisa has just come on board, but she's coming like a hurricane and positive hurricane. So
We can
yeah,
call
all
it
the team really works hard and collaboratively to get things done.
Thank you, and thanks so much for joining us today. So if you have nothing else to add, we'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Jules, for that discussion. And I just want to go through a few little housekeeping things. I just messaged in the chat, but I still see people doing it. Make sure that when you're adding something that you want everyone to see, that you choose the all panelists and attendees option. You can message people individually, but if you just message all panelists, it means that only myself, Mike, and Dr. Jules all see that. So please make sure that you're choosing that attendees thing so everyone can see your interesting messages. I'm not able to read all of them while we're doing this, but I can see people from all over the world joining in, and really glad to see that. So a few housekeeping things just for everyone to know a little bit more, and you can feel free to email us. I won't go through the technical things because if you've got this far, it means that you are able to use the technology. If you're watching on Facebook and you couldn't get in with the Zoom for whatever, but you'd like to, you can join. You can see the attendee guide if you go to bit.ly/VIS attendee, and we'll drop the link to that in the chat as well, so you can see it. If you, some of you will realize that the agenda was up in flux right until Friday. We had a lot of last minute sessions changes and things, and there still might be a couple of small substitutions for participants and things like that. But in general, the agenda is up and running. islandinnovation.co/agenda. And Alex, if you're listening, and could drop the link to both the attendee guide and to the agenda in the chat, that'd be really helpful. But if you go through the agenda, you can see that the sessions are spread right up from now until Friday. And we have a whole range of sessions. As I mentioned before, you won't be able to join every one, although I'm impressed if you do, just with different time zones and different and your other things going on in the week. I won't highlight any specifically because that would be unfair, but I will mention the two sessions that we have later today. Following this at 2:30 Eastern US time, we'll have Mainstreaming Island Innovation with Kate Brown of Glisper and Godfrey Baldacchino, who's the University of Malta. And then later on, we will have Queen Quet, Marquetta Johnson, Queen Quet, who is the chiefess of the Gullah Geechee Nation in the South Carolina coastal islands, which is a fascinating group of islands that many of you might not have heard about, and she'll be telling us about the cultural legacy there. So we'd encourage you to join both of those and then check out the rest of the sessions for the rest of the week. I also want to give a big thank you to all the partners in addition to OECS that have helped with this summit. We've had partners that have come on and sponsors have come on to partner on specific sessions. So I particularly want to thank the European Marine Energy Centre in Orkney. Orkney, if you've not heard about it, it's in the north of Scotland, and they are probably the most well-represented island group on the panel. Maybe that's because I'm a bit biased and I did my master's there as part of the University of the Highlands and Island Studies Master's Program, but they are very well represented. We also have Aquaterra and Solo Energy that are two energy companies joining us from Orkney. Additionally, we have the Global Green Growth Institute that work internationally and are based in South Korea. We have Nathan Associates. Adam Borison will be chairing a panel on e-mobility and electric vehicles. We have Leclanche Energy Storage Solutions that will be talking about battery solutions. We have Blue Planet Energy, who are also looking into resilient energy systems. Enexor Bioenergy Systems, who are helping us hold a panel on the sargassum issue, particularly relevant for those of you in the Caribbean. NB Communications, a digital marketing agency based in Shetland, that will be talking about digital opportunities for islands. The Ministry of Economic Development in Curacao, who are talking about the Smart Nation Curacao and their plans for a smart island. The Island Institute in Maine that works to build networks of islands across the US. And finally, the Ministry of Natural Resources in Canada that will be holding a session tomorrow called Global Practices and Challenges in Energy Storages for Islands and Small Island Developing States. So those are I've got to mention all of those sponsors. Really appreciate all that support. We have a lot more strategic partners, including the Global Islands Partnership, that we'll also be talking later, and we thank those, additionally Radio New Zealand, the Clinton Foundation, University College London's Resiliency Department, Islands Revival, and there are so many more. I can't mention all of them, but thank you to everyone for all of that support. Next, I wanted to mention the opportunities for interaction and how that might work. I know that often people will go to conferences or summits, and one of the main goals is meeting people. Obviously, you want to attend the sessions, but a big value is meeting people, and that's why we asked everyone to introduce themselves. And I can see you all meeting in the chat already. When this webinar ends, that chat will disappear, so make sure you grab the names or information of anything posted in there. But if you want to continue the conversation, we have 3 different platforms. The one that we've been promoting the most is the conference app called Attendify. If you look at any of the emails that I've sent you, and I know there's been quite a few, you'll see information on that conference app, or if you can just Google Attendify and download it. We already have 200 people in there, and there've been lots of people introducing themselves, and that's been a really great discussion. And then we have groups on Facebook and LinkedIn. And the Facebook group is very well established. The LinkedIn group is only recently created. The Facebook group, we already have 1,000 people in. And that for me has been one of the really big values of doing this project with Island Innovation, because what we want to do is connect these really diverse communities that have similar backgrounds, similar issues, but obvious differences as well. I mean, there's only so many commonalities that we can draw between Svalbard in the Arctic and Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. But there are things like waste management, high energy costs, climate change resiliency that are common to all of them. And what really struck me in that Facebook group was a conversation I saw a couple of months ago when someone, I think it was in one of the Scottish Islands, posted a story about what they were doing in terms of energy in their community. And there was a reply from someone, and again, this is off the top of my head, but I think it was Vanuatu, replied to that conversation with what they were doing in Vanuatu. And there were 2 different energy projects, and those 2 island groups are very different, but those 2 then had a conversation. Then someone chimed in from the Caribbean and said, we want to do this in the Caribbean. Where can I find out more? And it had this whole global conversation. And I think really that's what digital technology allows us to do. I mentioned the master's program at the University of the Highlands and Islands, and I saw Andrew Jennings is joined us here. So thank you, Andrew, for joining, who leads that program. And that was actually one of the inspirations for me for launching this, having an online master's program where people globally were able to join in and learn about islands. And I was actually studying over video link while I was in the Caribbean, looking at the Scottish Islands and able to see those commonalities. And that was what made me realize that actually the Caribbean and Scottish Islands have a lot more in common. So really just wanted to run you through some of those motivations before we get started in our next session with Mike. Finally, the one other thing I wanted to mention was the giveaway. We have 7 island books that have been donated by the authors and publishers. Really interesting, really relevant books that I'd encourage you to go ahead and buy and read anyway. They've been really fantastic. And if you go ahead and once you've signed up, you should be taken to that page. You can also go to islandinnovation.co/giveaway, and you can see those books and enter that competition. to win one of those. So thank you all for the authors and publishers who donated those. Okay, I've been talking enough now. I want to bring on the real star of the show, who I have known for getting on for 2 years now, who's a friend and a fantastic individual who's got a real vision for his home island. The Right Honourable Mike Eman is the former Prime Minister of Aruba and currently the leader of the opposition. He served as a politician on the island for many years and has a wealth of experience. Aruba is a really interesting case study as a Caribbean island that is also a country within the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So it has a very specific political status that Mike will explain for us. And that gives its own challenges. Aruba is also just a few miles off the coast of Venezuela. And so again, with the recent crisis in Venezuela, that has presented the island with its own problems, but is well known for its commitment for tourism and growingly its commitment to sustainability. So I'll ask Mike now to play your video and come on, if you just give us a second to work out this technology. We can see you, Mike. We can't hear you.
Good afternoon, James.
Thank you. Thank you. How are you doing? How's Aruba?
Good, thank you. And thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be sharing with you ideas and brainstorming together on how we can make this a more beautiful and more sustainable world.
Yeah, I really appreciate you joining us. I think you have such a wealth of knowledge and experience, and people who are coming from across the world are going to really want to visit Aruba after you've told them all about what you're doing. So if you want to go ahead and share your PowerPoint, your slides, and I know you've got some pictures so people can get an idea of what the situation in Aruba is like, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much for the invitation. It is indeed an honor and a great moment to share experience about the things that go well when you embark on a ambitious goal of creating a new, greener, more sustainable society, all the challenges that come with it and all the opportunities that come with it. And I'm very impressed with the introduction also of Dr. Jules, because he hit the nail on its head when he said approaching sustainability is broader than what some people sometimes focus the most on, which is the part of energy. When we embarked on our ambition to become totally sustainable in the area of energy by 2020, we connected the ambition to a greater cause of quality of life for our citizens in Aruba. And so that people could maybe understand a little bit better, I will also indeed share with you some slides of Aruba and what we did and what our experience was. For those that don't know exactly geographically where Aruba is located, we are one of the ABC Islands, forming part of the Dutch Caribbean islands. And Aruba is only 20 miles from the coast of Venezuela, as James said in his introduction. And James has become an expert of the islands, and it is quite remarkable and very encouraging that someone coming indeed from a big island, but quite far from the Caribbean in the UK, has such a feeling and heart and understanding of the Caribbean and the challenges and also the aspirations of the Caribbean island people. So James, shout out to you. Very impressed with your dedication towards creating a better understanding of the Caribbean and of the potential that the islands have, small island development states in general, not only in the Caribbean, but all over the world, as being a laboratory for development of new ideas, new technology, innovation, global solutions for global challenges. Today, I would like to give the audience and thank you also for all the participation. I see many names across the world who are attending this webinar, quite unique Island Innovation Initiative. Aruba is a small island. It's 30 kilometers long, and at the widest point, it's 9 kilometers. It is, as I mentioned in the beginning, and James also referred to it, close to Venezuela and the South American continent. As a small island, Aruba, as many other of the islands in the Caribbean Sea, has focused a lot of its development opportunities in the area of tourism. Aruba, very early on in its development, saw that it is important for us not only to embark on the economic development of our island, but also to secure and protect our nature. And for those that can see this beautiful map of Aruba, of this 30 kilometers long island, 9 kilometers wide at its widest section, is also the island that hosts one of the, in percentage, biggest national park in order to conserve our nature. Aruba is a quite dry island, and I'll bring you to important slides that I share with many in so many of my presentations. This is the Divi tree for 40. It has many names, but it is a beautiful symbol of the sustainable vision that we have developed over the last couple of years, because the island is very dry and it's quite tough for vegetation in Aruba. But you see this tree standing strong and tall in different parts of Aruba, and you ask yourself, what is so special that this tree survives all the drought and the very dry climate that we have. It is the particular strength of this tree, and I would say wisdom, because we have a strong northeast wind in Aruba, and this tree grows in the direction of the wind. There's even a very beautiful song that once was in the top records in Europe, One-Way Wind, that was inspired by these trees on the islands, especially in Aruba. And what this tree teaches us is that if you work with the forces of nature, you will be very sustainable, and you will flourish, and you will overcome even the greatest challenges that also nature presents. So for Aruba, we have made during our government years the Divi tree a symbol of our sustainable vision. It is also important that when you think about what we have been doing in Aruba in the years that we have developed our vision to become totally sustainable in the area of energy, is that we looked at Aruba as a whole. We didn't only think about how do we move from 100% fossil fuel energy capacity to 100% sustainable energy capacity, but we looked at the island as a whole. And as part of where our inspiration came for that vision, I'd like to share with you a little bit of the history of the island. I mentioned our location, I mentioned our size, our climate, and now I'll describe somewhat how the island has evolved in the last 50, 60 years. So you can place and understand how the vision to create a sustainable island has evolved, connected to other elements of development in our island. Aruba in the early 50s was quite economically quite undeveloped, I would say. We had a very small tourism industry on the large white sand beaches of Aruba. I must brag a little bit, one of the most beautiful, always in the top 10 of the world. We had only one hotel, and we mainly depended on our economy of our oil industry. I show you a picture of that industrial part, which is less beautiful than all the beautiful beaches of our island. And in the 50s, we had an island that evolved quite organically, and in the urban area, people had small agricultural economies, and our cities, we had small city development and quite quiet, typical 1950s small town development. And this all really changed in the 1980s. Aruba experienced one of its first very grave economic crises when the oil refinery closed, and we had a very, very big economic impact on government income, on employment in Aruba. And it was at that time that the government leaders, private leaders, decided that in order for Aruba to overcome this very dramatic, if you could imagine the crisis in 1933 in the US and in the Western world, or the crisis of 2007 and 8 in many of the big Western countries. The 1980s closing of the oil refinery was 10 times bigger than any of these crises that I just mentioned that happened in other parts of the world. We had 50% unemployment, suddenly from night to day. Government lost also almost 50% of its revenue. So it was at that time that the political leaders of Aruba and the private sector leaders developed a new idea of how we could overcome the economic challenges that Aruba was facing. And there was a big focus on expanding rapidly the tourism industry of Aruba. The government of Aruba took a lot of risk, gave guarantees, proactively went out and got the big name hotel operators like Hyatt's and Marriott's and Renaissance's to establish in Aruba. And the idea was in 4 years to overcome the economic crisis, to go from 2,000 hotel rooms to 4,000. And Aruba was very successful in implementing this rescue plan, even so successful that we did not double up the hotel capacity, but there was even triplication of the hotel capacity in less than 6 years. And we went very fast from 2,000 hotel rooms to more than 8,000 hotel rooms. Important to understand that such a development creates a lot of economic opportunity. It takes care of a lot of the unemployment that was so painfully felt in the society of Aruba at that time, and also created new economic opportunity. Every business connected to the tourism industry, shopping malls, restaurants, taxis, every service-oriented industry for the hospitality industry grew very fast in Aruba. Property value went sky high very fast in Aruba. So the impact that was sought was achieved, but was also at the point where the Aruban community reached, after some time, a important moment of reflection, say 25 years after this development. We reached a point of development, which I show on the screen right now, where in 1986, when the crisis started, we had a GDP of 415 million in 1986. By 25 years later, we had a GDP of almost 3 billion, 2.9 billion. So you could imagine the economic impact, the growth, and everything that accompanies such a growth. It is around this time that also my political organization, myself, and different think tanks that support our idea look back on this development. And we found that although we had grown very fast and it had definitely a important, also positive impact on the economic development of Aruba, but it also created a very fundamental question. And when addressing this question, I like to reflect on a very important quote of, for me, one of the most inspiring US political leaders that never became president, but also was an important supporter, advisor to his own brother, John F. Kennedy, who had become president. And this is a quote from Robert F. Kennedy that at a very, I would say, not a natural moment in economic and capitalistic development in the United States, where everyone thought that everything coming out of free markets and capitalism is great. This young leader had a very profound, reflective vision of where economic development, pure focused on material wealth, is lacking in translating itself into well-being for society and for humanity. And nowadays, I proud myself a little bit of being carrier of this quote of Robert F. Kennedy. Before it was like mainstream quoted around, I see in many conferences now. This is an important quote to make the point that we need to have an economic development that goes hand in hand with well-being of our society. Robert F. Kennedy in 1968 said that the over-focus on GDP missed out on other very important aspects of society. He said, yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of the play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion, nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. This is the same feeling that we had after 25 years of economic growth based mainly on tourism expansion in Aruba. We looked around our island and we found that we had a lot of evidence for the positive impacts of the rapid tourism development, but we also had a lot of profound and deep questions if this growth model would be the growth model that we will have to continue on in order to create happiness in our society. And we came to the conclusion, as Robert F. Kennedy came also in 1968, that there is a deeper meaning that makes people happy, that creates quality of life in just numbers that reflect in the GDP. And we found that also to be very true on our island, because as we could be very proud of our 5-star hotels that were all over our 9 kilometers stretched white beaches, we also found that same prosperity, those chandeliers in the lobbies of the hotels and the marmor tiles in the hotels did not reflect economic and social development in the rest of our island in a balanced way that would really create a more sustainable social economic development that really creates a more equitable distribution of wealth in our society. And for that contemplation brought us to a very deep feeling that we don't only want five-star hotels, but we also want five-star schools. We also want five-star neighborhoods. We want five-star quality of life and care for our elderly, five-star quality of care for our ill in our community, opportunities for our children, safe neighborhoods, places where people can come together, public spaces, and enjoy in a very democratic, irrespective of your economic position in the community, the beauty of what your island has to offer. So when we came to that conclusion, we developed a platform which was very much based on the concept of creating a society where the wealth is spread in a more equitable way, where when you drive around the island, you don't only see five-star hotels, but you also see nice neighborhoods, you see public spaces developed in a way that citizens can enjoy their island, that nature is conserved. And we set out a platform which we call the Social Dialogue, elected in 2009, even though we had a very strong majority, 12 seats in parliament that has 21 members, absolute majority. We still felt that we needed to approach the economy and the social development in Aruba with a lot of consensus building in our community. We had a lot of buy-in for how we see the future of our island with participation of our citizens. So we created a social dialogue platform where the employers organizations, the employees organization would come together, and we would sit meeting after meeting discussing where do we want to take Aruba, how can we create a more balanced and sustainable development for our island. Here you see one of these sessions that we had, but we did not limit it at those very formal citizen participation platforms, but we also had a lot of town hall meetings where we discussed the future development of Aruba, listened to our citizens, what they felt about where we had to go, and also capture in every neighborhood the needs of those neighborhoods so that we could come up with visions for our island. A lot of opportunity for citizens to participate and give their opinion on the development of our island, so we can create an island where the sun shines and rises for everyone and not for a few people on the island. So we developed, based on this vision, a sustainable vision for Aruba linked to our energy challenges, to go from, at that moment, almost totally dependent on fossil fuel to produce 100 megawatts of energy in Aruba, to go to 100% sustainable energy by 2020. And we developed that in a very integral way, in a collaboration with the community. So we developed city renewal projects, and I'll just go fast. If you look at our main street, as I can show it here, this was typically, before we started our main street, we wanted a main street that is more for pedestrians, more trees, more sitting places, walkability, connection with the harbor area. So we connected with the tram connection to the rest of the economic possibilities that the island has when you have cruise tourism, to make sure that the tourists also would get in the center of your island. This same vision also was connected to having our people enjoy more. If you see how the streets were and how they became to enjoy more the opportunities that Aruba had to offer, and give the citizens also, not only the tourists, the happiness of sharing a beautiful island and having an island that focuses very much on well-being of its citizens. Every island, James, and the audience has a challenge for economic growth. This is the fundamental question. How can we achieve growth in a sustainable way? We can all attest to principles that in the world we have also committed ourselves to, when we say that we have 17 sustainable development goals, and we want a balanced society. We want to ensure that there's an equitable distribution of wealth, that our nature and everything that makes our creation so beautiful is also conserved. But at the same time, we need jobs, we need economic prosperity. And one of the things that we looked at when we looked at the challenge of creating a sustainable island was, if we wanted jobs, and we needed jobs when we started in 2009, right after the crisis, and again a closing of a refinery, we said you could create jobs in a creative way by combining your aspiration to become sustainable with the opportunities of investing, not in making more, but making nicer, more beautiful, so more in quality and in quantity. So we looked around our island and we looked at our monuments, and we invested a lot in renewing our monuments. We had a lot of historical buildings that were dilapidated, so we invested a lot in restoration of, typical the icons of a society, a water tower, our courthouse, our government building, focused a lot on our infrastructure, creating a quality of life that would expand from hotel areas to every corner of Aruba. I just put on screen right now a picture of, there was an important road from one point to another point in Aruba, which we developed a four-way lane to, but we didn't only look at the road. If you see the picture above, you see how it was, a road, dirt, and then the houses. We said, we don't only want a nice, beautiful road that was more efficient and wider, but we also wanted to enhance the quality of life between the road and the households. And this is we did for many miles of stretch around the house, around this new road, which we call the Green Corridor, and that really enhanced the quality of life for thousands of our citizens with this approach, and created jobs, created economic opportunity. We looked at other government buildings that were dilapidated, and we focused a lot on renovating those buildings. We focused a lot on creating public spaces where in the past almost no one was walking in Aruba, only driving their cars. We created miles of linear park, and I get a lot of satisfaction when I look at Aruba today after some of our years totally invested in creating this link between the economic development and quality of life of our citizens, that we have created all these public spaces where people walk, families, 3 generations, with the pets, the house, everyone getting involved, also creating a stronger social cohesion in our community. A new hospital, new harbor, renovating our schools, renovating public houses, neighborhoods, many new public housing neighborhoods we renovated over this period of time. where those houses were just 4 walls and a roof. We created gardens, we created parking spaces, we created sidewalks, we created beautiful pavement, beautiful trees, and we went on from one neighborhood to the other. So creating a link between need for economic development, jobs, and well-being at the same time. So we didn't look at creating new neighborhoods, but went back to the neighborhoods that we had and saw the ones that were not up to par, and we invested heavily in creating really nice places for people to live, to enjoy, and we did it with a lot of citizens' participation. We challenged the neighborhoods to help paint their areas. We created a lot of playgrounds in our neighborhoods, and a lot of participation of the citizens themselves. And James, because I know many of your people that are listening really are focusing on the energy part, but I really wanted to make it clear in my presentation that for Aruba, it was not only about the energy, it was about a sustainable quality of life for our island and our citizens. And so we connected our vision to make our island green, also to, and I find it very encouraging today when I read the Green New Deal plan in the United States. It has so much of what we also felt in Aruba, that you need to create your green vision connected to your economy. For our energy, and I will end with that, our main objective was to convert our reliance on fossil fuel in producing our energy and water, and convert that to our very strong resources in Aruba, sun and wind. We have a very large wind park in Aruba, planning to expand the wind park in Aruba. This produces almost 18% of the energy capacity in Aruba. It's called Fadepit. One thing that's great to mention here is that Aruba has a very attractive wind regimen. The wind is quite constant in Aruba, and the wind is very strong. So we are in many countries when a wind park installation produces more or less 40% of its capacity in a average output. In Aruba, it is 60%. So that is almost a no-brainer to have more windmills in Aruba. This is when the solar park right in front of the airport was being built. Now it's ready, as you know, and we have also another huge solar park on the eastern side of the island, and we have many smaller solar roofs on many government buildings during our administration that we introduced. And to finalize, we promoted green energy in all ways, lowered the import duties on electrical cars and hybrid cars. We also looked at the development of Aruba's goal to become a sustainable island. We saw in this important goal an opportunity to create a new economic pillar for Aruba based on knowledge. The knowledge that we would acquire in the process of making our island green and sustainable, all the new technologies, all the applications that we would introduce in Aruba, we would also showcase them in Aruba, and at a certain moment develop a whole new knowledge economy in Aruba, which would export this experience to the rest of the world. So we attracted institutes such as TNO, which is the largest research institute in the Netherlands, to establish in Aruba. We dedicated it to one of our very proud academics, and Dr. Edward Chung, who works at NASA, son of our soil, to show also that our innovation ideas and our ideas to make very inspiring conversions are ideas that can be carried by our own people also. And you can look around all the initiatives that we took around our island, the smart community, which is 20 household village that would include all the new technologies that you need to create a sustainable society in a small scale, in a small community. Have them tested, have them showcased, so you can export the knowledge. We had many partners, Carbon War Room, Harvard University, very important, also Rocky Mountain Institute. We worked closely with former Vice President Al Gore. We worked closely with Mr. Richard Branson. We presented Aruba's vision with Mr. Richard Branson at Rio Plus 20. And the idea was at the end, not only to have Aruba making this transition, but also bring other islands along. And we made this commitment also in Rio. And since then, many islands have hopped onto this vision. I must say, the last couple of years, with some pain in my heart, even I think surpassing Aruba somewhat. I'm not totally in charge anymore to lead the race, but definitely we have set the pace for something good for the world and made it also very visible for the world that it is possible to make this important transition to a more sustainable society. So that's what I like to share with you today. It is part of our experience. We invited many companies to be part of this transition that would create that new economic pillar also for Aruba. And we are quite satisfied that we were successful in reaching high percentages. When I left office, we were at almost 40% of our energy capacity based on renewable energy, going for more. Governments change things, plans change, but definitely we set the pace, and we are very happy that we could have contributed to setting this agenda. I remember when Vice President Biden invited me to sit next to him, so we could inspire other islands to believe that this could be done. We did not get special grants from no part in the world. We did this purely based on very realistic economic figures, very sustainable, and we have now also created in Aruba a faculty next to our law faculty and other faculties at our university, where we could share this knowledge with our own citizens, but also people that come and learn from the Aruba experience. And we're always eager to learn from others. So very happy with all the platforms you're creating, James.
Thank you, Mike. That was a fantastic introduction to everything that you're doing, and for a lot of people from all over the world to Aruba. And I can say that we've got nearly 150 people, and they all stayed for the length of that. So clearly, you're saying something that resonates, they find interesting. And we also have a lot more people tuning in over Facebook. And so to everyone joining over Facebook, thank you for joining us there. If you'd like to join future sessions and to be able to ask questions and contribute, go to the Island Innovation website, and you can join through Zoom as well, which will allow you to join the chat box and submit questions. We've had a lot of questions submitted, and I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, but I think what you just said is quite a nice segue. One of the questions that's come up a lot, or a theme that's come up a lot, has been about the relationship between the Dutch Caribbean islands and the Netherlands. And obviously Aruba uses the word country, but it's not a simple yes or no answer when you say, is Aruba a country? There's a lot of, it depends on who you ask and what you mean. So perhaps you could just explain that briefly. And one of the points that someone raised was, so did the Netherlands pay for all this? And I know that you'll have an answer for that one. So we'll start with that and explore that a little bit.
Yes, no, the Netherlands did not pay for that. We have invested our own resources of our island, and we have also, with PPP projects, created a lot of partners long-term for our island. And I must say also our PPP projects are somewhat also an example now in the Caribbean region. Many authorities come to Aruba and look at the way we were creative in financing, which is always a challenge for small island developing states with very small budgets. Our relationship with the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Aruba's autonomous status was officialized in 1986 on the 1st of January. We are autonomous in the sense that we have a clear separation of the government policies and authorities that are what we call kingdom affairs and what are local affairs. The kingdom affairs are our foreign affair. Foreign affairs is a kingdom responsibility. The embassies in the world, the Dutch Kingdom embassies, are financed by the Netherlands, but very accessible for us. If I have to prepare a visit to Panama or to Colombia or to Costa Rica, I can request the ambassador in Costa Rica to prepare my visit, and he would do as a good job for me as he would do for Prime Minister Rutte in the Netherlands. So that's very beneficial for a small island to have this relationship with a larger country, since having an effective embassy in important parts of the world would be almost impossible for a small island to finance. Also, defense, very important. We are in a quite turbulent region, it's very important that our territorial integrity is well marked and also well respected, and being part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, being part of the EU, being part of NATO, creates that territorial integrity guarantee for us, which is very important. We have the Dutch nationality that gives us all the European passport. So I could live in the Netherlands, I could live in France, I could live in England, I could come and be in the UK and until Brexit, I think, and work in the UK.
But I can't come and live in Aruba. Is that right?
No, we have some protective immigration rules because we are islands. So even the Dutch cannot just come here. Sometimes they complain about that because we can go live in the Netherlands whenever we want. And many of our students go and study in the Netherlands, and sometimes they stay living in the Netherlands. But because we're a small island, it's accepted that we could regulate the immigration policy somewhat different for the protection of the labor markets on Aruba. Also important is that the head of state is the king, and that creates also a bond between all parts of the kingdom, and all other aspects of the ruling and governing of a country are our own. So our own economic visions, education, culture, etc. The last couple of years, there is a lot of discussion in how much room islands that are countries within the Kingdom of the Netherlands get with regard to public finance. But that's going to be a very complicated discussion at this moment. Interesting, because it creates a new dynamic in the relationship between islands and their former motherlands. Some tension, some challenges, some opportunities, but that's a topic for another occasion.
Well, I wanted to ask you because I've been lucky enough to visit Aruba twice this year, which is obviously a very nice experience. And it's interesting for me, obviously, European, there are still several, France and the UK also have different territories in the Caribbean, and as do the Americans and also the Colombians. So there's several different countries that have islands in the Caribbean, and each of those have very different relationships. And there was a fantastic conference organized by the University of Aruba and the University of Prince Edward Island that actually looked into those details about subnational island jurisdictions. For anyone who wants to know more about that, the next session will have Godfrey Baldacchino from the University of Malta, who's an expert in island studies and a lot of these constitutional relationships, because what you described as a relationship with Aruba and the Netherlands is very different to, say, the British Virgin Islands and the UK, or the Falkland Islands in the UK. It's a very specific relationship, and I would say from my perspective, it seems like you get a better deal than the UK territories get from the UK. But obviously that's subjective.
maybe to be more complete, within the Kingdom of the Netherlands, there are 6 islands, and there are 2 different regiments, constitutional regiments. Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin have the position of a country within the Kingdom of the Netherlands, with the different division of authorities as I described. And then you have the smaller islands, Bonaire, St. Eustatius, and Saba, that are more kind of municipalities of the Netherlands. And they are also going through the motion of experiencing what that status that they also acquired in 2010, how that works out for them, where the opportunities are, where the constraints are. It's a really interesting constitutional challenge, because there is friction. In my government period, I have tried to focus on the new reasons why we could give this inherited relationship that we have a new significance. And sustainability was an important part of that, because we looked during my government tenure at where are opportunities to involve companies and institutions from the Netherlands to be part of our sustainable vision in Aruba. And it was based on that we brought back KLM to Aruba. I would say intensified our relationship with Schiphol, that manages our airport, did many research studies on the automatization of passengers arriving at airports in Aruba for Schiphol. We attracted Philips to be part of Aruba, TNO, and I believe that if you don't focus on the opportunities, the frictions will get the highlight of the relationship, and would definitely erode the support on both sides of the ocean for the relationship that has a lot of benefit, but left alone without investing in where there are new opportunities would create a lot of challenge. I see in all islands where they question, why do we still have a relationship with a former motherland? There are opportunities, and I think someday we should dedicate a program to that, because in the area of the global challenges, islands can play an important role as a laboratory, and that can be also very significant for the relationship between the islands and their former motherland.
Yeah, we could talk for hours about the constitutional relationship, but I'm aware that that's not as interesting to everyone who's joining as it is to me and you. But I think a nice segue into that is Francesco Sindico from the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, who I know is involved in Scotland's islands policy recently, has asked, how does Aruba engage with the SDGs? And the segue is that the SDGs, and I should say the Sustainable Development Goals, are mandated at the United Nations. And so as Aruba is not a member of the United Nations, it's represented as the Kingdom of the Netherlands. What do the SDGs look like in Aruba, and how are they being implemented?
We were very honored to have been chosen by the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Of the 7 partners, so the Netherlands and the 6 islands that could have presented the vision of the Kingdom of the Netherlands at the UN at the presentation of the SDGs. Aruba was chosen because of what we have been doing on the area of the SDGs in Aruba to present the Kingdom vision on the SDGs at the UN in 2015, if I remember correctly. What for us really marks the SDGs and the development in Aruba is it fits so nicely with what we have set out to do when we decided that we want to become not only island with 5-star hotels, but also 5-star schools, 5-star neighborhood, 5-star quality of life for our people. We really, maybe even before SDGs became official and formal, in that vision, already embarked on that balance that the SDGs are searching for between economic development and environmental responsible development, between social equitable development and a free market economy. And in so many areas that we have embarked on, we already had the principles of SDGs in our approach. What we did immediately when we adopted the SDGs is make a baseline study of where we are in Aruba in the area of SDGs. Aruba, because we're part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, have a history of creating a quite strong social network. So welfare for people that don't work, elderly pension, we have a general medical insurance, we have a minimum wage, it's quite high. So we, in comparison with many other countries and islands in the region, score very high on these areas. And then on other areas like because of overdevelopment, we see threats to our ocean, we see threats to the conservation of our nature. So all those pluses and minuses were put very clear in a baseline study, and we set out our goals to improve on each of the 17 goals and monitor that yearly. I lost your audio, James.
Sorry about that. Thank you. The community participation aspect was what I was asking about. So someone, and I can't actually see their name, asked how the local community engages with this, because it seems in Aruba you obviously have the very powerful hotel chains that have a big role and obviously contribute a lot to the economy and provide a lot of jobs. But you also have the local community groups and individuals. And so I just wonder if you have anything to comment about your ideas or what you've seen in terms of engaging the community with these issues around the Sustainable Development Goals, for example.
Yes, and if it's okay with you, I'll just bring you back a second to a picture. Important, James, when you have a sustainable vision for your island, your country, your city, is that it has a broad-based support in the community, not only for the implementation as you go along, but also for continuity. And if you ask me, if I look back at the 8 years of our government, we invested a lot in trying to guarantee also that continuity. And one way we worked very hard on creating the support during implementation was by creating this social dialogue platform, which I referred to in my introduction. We are, if you look at this picture, you don't know the people, but here are all the important union members of Aruba are sitting at this table, and all the employers' organization are sitting at the table, and in here the government the officials that are required for this particular meeting. We set weeks every afternoon till late in the evening discussing all the issues with regard to pension, social development, economic development in Aruba, public finance, to create a support and understanding in the plans for the future that could rely on a broad-based support in the community with a buy-in, but also with a lot of contribution of ideas, and in order to get a well-balanced vision for the island. And the social dialogue has been an example also for many others. Many have visited Aruba afterwards to look at this concept. Some islands are now or have formalized the social dialogue as a platform, and others have it also in a more informal way, like worked well for us. We also went to neighborhoods, talked to the people in town hall meetings, sometimes in broad sense of what is the challenge, but sometimes very specific. If we were renewing a particular neighborhood, what do you think about narrow streets? Do you want more walkability? Do you want more trees, less trees? What type of trees? One direction roads, two direction roads. So a lot of citizen participation in order to guarantee the buy-in. But I must say, it is not always an assurance. When I look back, for instance, on the city renewal projects, if we had more buy-in of the private sector when we embarked on our city renewal projects, we would have today more private-led projects in our downtown area than we have now. So it's not always a guarantee, but we really did a lot in order to very soon get the buy-in, get also the input of the private sector and the citizens, and that worked well in neighborhoods, worked well in the infrastructural parts of Aruba, worked a little bit less in getting the private sector also to capitalize on the renewable energy opportunities, the electrical cars, getting the private sector also to hop on the idea of investing in the city as we went on renewing it. So as I mentioned to you when you put the title, I think it was a very, very complimentary title for my presentation. I asked you, let's change it a little bit and let's talk about the Aruba experience, because there are very great things that we did and we learned, and there are also things that when we look back and say, how could you assure better that certain buy-in, certain continuity would be guaranteed?
Yeah, thank you. And we unfortunately only have 5 minutes left, and we could obviously talk for hours and about all of these subjects. And thank you so much. We've had over 30 questions over Zoom, but I'm also trying to keep track because people are emailing me, people are sending them over Facebook. So questions flying in from everywhere, which is great, but apologies to everyone for not getting to all of them, particularly some of the more specific ones. But I'd encourage you to post those questions in the Facebook group, in the conference app, Attendify, and perhaps other people will also be able to contribute to that conversation in there. And I know there's a lot of participants from Aruba and the other Dutch islands that I'm sure would have their own opinions as well. So just to wrap up, I'm curious about that continuity question a little bit more. And I don't think this is unique to Aruba. I think most islands struggle with, and even not islands, if we look at the United States and the UK right now, struggle with this kind of division of politics. And you're, of course, very diplomatic as the leader of the opposition in the approach that you've just taken. But the question that's really interesting to me is how do we find a way to try and secure that continuity for these projects, because there are so many different stakeholders, so many different opinions and different priorities. And I've seen this in many different islands and small island developing states that have had a new government come in and the priorities change and amazing projects have not continued. So I'll leave that open to how you might want to answer that.
Well, it's one of the fundamental questions in the reflection on looking back. When we embarked on this vision of creating a sustainable society for Aruba, I was very much inspired and also experienced what President Kennedy said when he held this famous speech that he wanted to put a man on the moon before the decade was over. And one sentence in his speech, he said that the energy we will bring to bear to make this happen would inspire and create so much innovation and new thinking that it would reflect on all other aspects of society. And I also experienced that when we set out these very ambitious goals of what we wanted to do with our neighborhoods, with our energy, what we wanted to do with our cities, that and how we also embraced the dialogue, that we had really created the spur of energy to make this difference on our side. And I never believed that once this spur of energy would get the momentum and also the collaboration of the society, that a government change, just to have the dates a little bit clear on your peoples, we governed from 2009 to 2017, so after 8-year term, we had a government change in Aruba. We were still the largest political party in the elections, but we lost the majority to continue government. And the new government came in with other ideas on the pace of what we wanted to do in Aruba, and maybe priorities were different. That really changed the momentum. And I'm not going to judge if their priorities are correct or not. That's for our local discussion, not to do on an international webinar. But it really changes the dynamic of what we were doing. And I'm not happy about that, because I believe that long-term sustainable development goals that we all aspire need a long-term vision and need continuity. How you guarantee that continuity? I have been asked that question on every platform. I've been invited conferences to speak lately, and I told them if I had the answer, I would probably be the Secretary General of the UN. I don't have the answer, but I know it's very necessary to try to create that sense of non-partisanship with regard to these ambitions.
No, I think that's some great points, and people are just writing in the chat about similar experiences in other countries of these different continuity issues. And I think it's worth pointing out as well that continuity is not just political. There's a very economic element, and I've seen lots of fantastic projects that have been government funded, which I guess makes them political. But even when it's not so much of a political issue, there's 2 years of funding put into a project, but no real thought on how to keep it going after that. There's continuity includes politics, but it goes beyond that as well. So thank you very much for covering that. We're going to have to wrap up in about a minute. Were there any final quick comments?
Well, a compliment to you and everyone that invests time in reflecting on our challenge to make this a more beautiful and sustainable world. It's admirable that so many people of all walks of life are really committed to what we should do to create a more sustainable and equitable quality of life for all our citizens in the world. So I thank you very much, James, for your leadership and all the institutions, because I see the mails I have from you are connected to already almost 10 institutions. So you're tireless in also the endeavor to help and support all initiatives for islands especially, but for others also, to create a happier world for all. So thank you, James.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate those kind words. What a nice way to end the session, and also what a great way to start the week with this session. Now, I know that we've got 27 sessions, as I mentioned, spread throughout the week. So I know a lot of people will be just joining into specific ones. As Mike had already mentioned, we have a lot of renewable energy sessions, but a wide variety from journalism to the Arctic issues, a real big range of issues. And so later on today, I hope some of you will be able to join us. We have a session, as I mentioned, in about an hour and a half. No, in an hour, sorry, that will be with Godfrey Baldacchino and Kate Brown from GLISPA. And I think that's going to be a really interesting discussion, looking at some of the academic side of the discussion and some of the economic issues. And then, and I think some of those people have been joining in as well. I think that the session following will, as I mentioned, Queen Quet from the Gullah Geechee people in the southeast of the US. And again, that will be a great issue. Just saw someone commenting, asking where to find the agenda. We're going to log off, so it's going to disappear soon. But if you go to islandinnovation.co/agenda, it will come up. But also, if you've been receiving emails from me, and I know a couple of people have struggled because they've been going into the spam, so make sure to check your spam for those emails. There'll be links in there, and there's also links to the Facebook and LinkedIn groups there. So we'll leave it there. We successfully did the technology to connect this to Facebook. So if you want to rewatch it or share it, visit the Island Innovation Facebook page. And this discussion has been saved there. And I know there were questions that were asked on there as well. Sorry for not getting to them all. Thank you so much, everyone, especially as this was a Sunday. And thank you, Mike. Have a good day, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.